I remember the smell of wet earth and something unknown, mineral, floating in the cold air. We arrived at that remote area almost at dusk, burdened with equipment and expectations. Javier and I were the perfect team in theory. Me, the biologist fascinated by the underground, him, the engineer capable of making anything work in hell. We knew each other from before, from some conference, from those technical talks that drag on longer than they should. There was always a spark, an unspoken tension, something that hovered between equations and species classifications. But we both had our lives, our routines, far from adventure. This expedition was different. Months of preparation, a remote location, just the two of us and the silence of the earth. The cave we were going to explore promised to be virgin, with unique ecosystems no one had seen before. A dream for any biologist, and a challenge for an engineer. The cave entrance was imposing, a black mouth on the hillside. We prepared the equipment with a mix of professionalism and nervousness. Helmets, powerful flashlights, ropes. Javier checked each anchor with a meticulousness that reassured me, although his closeness was already starting to make me nervous. The air inside was colder, denser. The sound of our steps and the constant dripping of water were the only noises. The rough walls, sometimes smooth from erosion, closed in around us. Javier went ahead, leading the way, his athletic figure standing out against the darkness. Hours later, the cave opened into an immense gallery. Our flashlights swept over giant stalactites and stalagmites, creating dancing shadows. And then we saw it. An intense blue glow in the distance. The lake. We approached slowly, breathless. The water was so clear it seemed you could see to the center of the earth. It reflected the light of our flashlights and the rock formations with an unreal beauty. It was even more impressive than we had imagined. We set up the base camp near the shore. A couple of small tents, the analysis equipment, and the feeling of being completely isolated from the world. Down here, only we and science existed. Or so we tried to tell ourselves. The days became a strange routine. Exploring, taking samples, analyzing data. We worked side by side, sometimes in silence, sometimes chatting about trivialities or the mysteries surrounding us. The forced closeness began to take its toll. One afternoon, while Javier was checking a submerged sensor, his hand brushed mine. It was a brief, accidental contact, but a jolt ran up my arm. He looked up, our eyes met in the dim light, and for a second, the entire cave seemed to hold its breath. From that moment on, everything changed. Conversations became more careful, glances more intense. There was an underground current of desire that we couldn't ignore, but also couldn't name. We both had commitments outside these rock walls. One night, after eating cold canned food, the generator failed. Darkness enveloped us completely, broken only by the light of our headlamps. The silence became deeper, more intimate. Javier approached to check the equipment, and I stood still, feeling his presence. The light from his flashlight, usually focused on wires and tools, shifted towards me. His eyes, intense even in that limited light, met mine. Nothing needed to be said. The darkness, the isolation, everything conspired to break down barriers. He leaned in slightly, and the air filled with the faint smell of sweat and damp rock. My heart pounded against my ribs. It was the moment. That precarious instant when you know you're about to cross a line, and a part of you wants to run, but the other stays rooted. His lips found mine in the darkness. A hesitant kiss at first, then deeper, more urgent. Javier's hands rested on my waist, pulling me towards him. My fingers tangled in his short, damp hair. The cave, a silent witness, seemed to whisper around us. The dripping of water, monotonous before, now seemed to set its own rhythm. Our bodies found each other under the technical clothing, clumsy at first, then with surprising familiarity. We separated for an instant, breathing heavily. The light from our headlamps crossed in the air, revealing only fragments. A bare shoulder, the curve of a back, the tension in muscles. It was like discovering a new ecosystem, one made of skin and size. The air became warmer, charged. The cave's humidity was no longer just environmental, but emanated from us. Every touch, every caress, felt amplified in that confined, primitive space. We forgot where we were, who we were outside of it. We moved awkwardly towards the tent, or rather, guided ourselves by touch. The nylon fabric felt cool against hot skin. Once inside, the space shrank even further, making every movement either intentional or dangerously close. Our flashlights were left outside, leaving only darkness and the faint light filtering from the main gallery. The sound of our heavy breathing filled the small space. The cave's silence now felt like an accomplice. Clothes began to get in the way. Each piece that fell to the tent floor was a small act of rebellion against the outside world. We were just two human beings, stripped of titles and responsibilities, moving by instinct in the darkness. Skin against skin, warm and real. Feeling the texture of his skin, the beat of his heart close to mine. It was a primal connection, freed from the complexities of our normal lives. Here, in the depth of the earth, the rules seemed different. Broken whispers filled the air. Words that made no sense outside that context, but meant everything in that moment. Names, sounds of contained pleasure, ragged breaths. The cave would keep our secrets. Time seemed to stop or speed up, I don't know. I only know that moment existed, that space between us, filled with a raw, liberating intensity. It was as if the cave's pressure was compressing us, but also releasing something within us. And then, silence. A different silence than before. It wasn't the silence of exploration or camping. It was a shared silence, heavy with what had just happened. Our bodies still intertwined, breathing slowly returning to normal. Neither of us spoke for a long time. There was no need. The cave had been a witness to our secret, and that secret bound us in a way that science or work never could. We were accomplices in an underground paradise. Finally, Javier broke the silence, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Elena," he said my name, and it sounded different in that space. I turned to look at him, his eyes dark in the dim light. There was a mix of wonder and concern on his face. We didn't answer the obvious questions hanging in the air. What does this mean? What do we do now? We left them suspended, like the stalactites from the ceiling. For now, only the reality of that moment existed, warm and dangerous. We spent the rest of the night close to each other, not really sleeping. Every small sound from the cave startled us. Not out of fear, but from the heightened awareness of our situation. We were two strangers sharing an immense secret in the heart of the earth. With the first faint light that filtered from above through some invisible crack, we dressed in silence. The air in the tent smelled of intimacy and nascent regret. Or perhaps not regret, but the harsh reality knocking on the door. We emerged from the tent into the cold air of the gallery. The crystal lake was still there, impassive, reflecting the rock formations as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened, and the way we looked at each other now was different. We had to keep working. The expedition wasn't over. But every task, every measurement, every sample, was now tinged by the awareness of what we shared. Professionalism was a thin mask over an underground current of emotions. Working together in such a confined space became a constant exercise in self-control. Avoiding prolonged eye contact, maintaining professional distance, not letting a sigh or a glance reveal too much. The cave, once a place of discovery, now felt like a gilded cage. The lake, once a symbol of purity and mystery, now reminded me of the previous night. Its calm surface seemed to mock the storm raging inside me. Had it just been the intensity of the moment, the isolation, the darkness? Javier also seemed different, quieter, more thoughtful. Sometimes I found him looking at me when I wasn't looking, with an expression I couldn't decipher. Remorse? Lingering desire? The same confusion I felt? The tension between us was palpable, like the water pressure in the depths of the lake. Every movement, every word, every silence, was charged with meaning. It was exhausting, but also, strangely exciting. Days passed. We continued exploring new galleries, documenting species, mapping the system. Science gave us a purpose, an excuse to be there, to be together. But the real exploration was happening on a different plane. There were moments when the professional barrier crumbled. A shared laugh at a silly joke, a moment of danger overcome together, simple fatigue at the end of a long day. In those instances, we were just Elena and Javier, with a secret between us. One afternoon, we found a small cove at the edge of the main lake, more secluded, more intimate. The water there was especially clear, and the light filtering from somewhere created magical reflections on the walls. It was a place out of a dream. We stopped there for a while, supposedly to take samples. But the air was different. Quieter, more charged. The sound of our own silence was deafening. My eyes rested on the water, so tempting. Javier was a little further back, adjusting something on his equipment. I felt his gaze on my back. The warmth of it, even from a distance. The idea of immersing myself in that cold water, of washing away the tension of the past few days, became irresistible. Without saying a word, I started taking off my equipment. The helmet, the gloves, the waterproof jacket. Each item was less weight, one less layer between me and the cave, between me and him. I stood in my thermal underwear, feeling the cool air on my skin. I turned to look at Javier. He had stopped what he was doing and was watching me. His expression was unreadable, but the intensity in his eyes said it all. The water called me. I approached the edge and dipped a foot in. It was icy, but not unpleasantly so. It was pure, revitalizing. I got in slowly, feeling the cold ascend my legs, my body. The thermal fabric clung to my skin. I swam a few meters, feeling the weightlessness of the water. The light underwater was magical, a translucent blue. I could see the submerged rock formations with astonishing clarity. And I could feel his gaze. I got out of the water, trembling slightly from the cold, but feeling clean and exposed. The thermal clothing clinging to my body didn't leave much to the imagination. Javier was still there, motionless, watching me. I walked towards him, the sound of water dripping from my clothes and hair breaking the silence. The air between us became electrified again. It wasn't just the tension from the night before, it was something deeper, more allowed in that hidden corner. He said nothing, just extended a hand. I took it. His skin was warm, mine cold from the water. The contrast was stimulating. He gently pulled me towards him. This time there was no hesitation. The kiss was immediate, hungry. The taste of the pure cave water on my lips mixed with his. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against his warm body. The thermal clothing, which had felt revealing before, now seemed like a useless barrier. We wanted to be closer, to feel skin without impediment. The urgency grew in the intimacy of that hidden corner. We didn't go back to the tent. The bare rock, surprisingly smooth in places, became our bed. The sound of water dripping around us, the dancing reflections on the walls. It was wild, primal, perfect. feeling the coolness of the rock beneath my back and the warmth of his body on mine. A strange and stimulating duality. Every caress, every kiss, every sigh felt amplified by the silence and darkness surrounding us. We lost track of time in that hidden corner. Only sensation, touch, the sound of our breaths existed. It was a bubble of desire and secrecy in the heart of the earth. Our own exotic and forbidden adventure. When we finally stopped, exhausted and satisfied, the cave remained silent, keeping our secret. The air smelled of intimacy, pure water, and the rock itself. We stayed there for a while, nestled together, not wanting to break the spell. The return to camp was silent. Professionalism settled back in, but it was different. Now there was an underlying layer of tenderness, perhaps, and the constant awareness of the secret we shared. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Science by day, stolen glances, not so accidental touches, the simmering tension. And at night, the forced closeness of the tents, the awareness that the other was only meters away. There were nights when the temptation was almost unbearable. The memory of skin against skin, the taste of the kiss, the sound of whispers in the dark. The cave seemed to encourage us to yield, to forget the outside world. But reality always returned. Photos of our families on satellite phones, conversations about the normal future outside. We were explorers, yes, but also people with complex lives outside those rock walls. The expedition was coming to an end. The analyses were almost complete, the mapping finished. The cave had given us its scientific secrets, but it had also forced us to confront others, more personal, more dangerous. The last night at camp was the hardest. The air was heavy with the unspoken, with the impending farewell. We sat by the lake, watching the reflections of our flashlights on the water, not speaking. The temptation to return to that hidden corner, to cling to the bubble of secrecy and desire one last time, was almost overwhelming. But reality, that cold, hard rock, had become too present. Javier got up first. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice neutral. I stood up too. The air between us was so thick you could almost touch it. We walked towards our separate tents. That night, the cave's silence was not an accomplice, but a judge. Every drip of water, every echo, seemed to remind me of what we had done, what we had risked, and what we were about to leave behind. The next morning, we dismantled the camp with almost military efficiency. Every gesture was precise, every word necessary. There was a hurry to leave, to return to the world where the rules were clear, albeit less exciting. We walked back through the cave in almost complete silence. Our flashlights illuminated the path, but not our faces. We were again two professionals, two scientists, with a successful expedition to report. As we exited the cave mouth, the sun blinded us for an instant. The outside air felt different, lighter, but also less charged with possibilities. The real world greeted us with its noise and normality. We said goodbye at the extraction point with a formal handshake. "Good work, Javier." Likewise, Elena. Empty words, full of everything left unsaid. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw in his the same mix of memory and goodbye. We got into separate vehicles. As we drove away, I looked back. The black mouth of the cave was still there, silent, keeping our secret in its depths. It was our paradise, our cage, our witness. I returned to my normal life. My work, my routine, my commitments. Everything seemed the same, but I was different. I carried the cave inside me, the smell of wet earth, the sound of dripping water, the memory of a forbidden night. Sometimes, in the middle of a meeting or preparing dinner, a memory hits me. The light on the underground lake, the feeling of the cold rock, the warmth of his skin in the dark. And for an instant, I am back there, in our secret bubble. Javier and I have crossed paths sometimes at professional events. A cordial greeting, a brief chat about the expedition, always in scientific terms. But in the glances, in the handshake that perhaps lasts a second longer than necessary, is the lingering memory. The cave is still there, somewhere remote, keeping our secrets. And we are still here, on the surface, living our normal lives, but with the certainty that, in the darkness, underground, we were different. We were ourselves, without masks, in a forbidden paradise.